You think you know people. You think loyalty means something, especially when you've built everything together from scratch. I'm Rebecca, I'm 31, and this is the story of how I discovered that some people will smile at your face while planning to destroy everything you've worked for. It started on a rainy Wednesday in October when I got the call that changed everything. I was in my corner office on the 15th floor of our Seattle headquarters, looking out at the Space Needle through floor-to-ceiling windows. The company Jessica and I had built was finally hitting 8 figures in annual revenue. "Rebecca, we need to talk," Jessica's voice came through my phone, tense in a way I'd never heard before. "Can you meet me at the Metropolitan tonight? 8 o'clock. The Metropolitan was our place, the upscale restaurant where we'd celebrated our first million in revenue, where we'd toasted our Series B funding, where we'd planned the future of cloud-sync technologies. It seemed fitting that Jessica wanted to meet there to discuss whatever was weighing on her mind. I arrived first, wearing my lucky navy blazer and the Cartier watch I'd bought myself when we closed our biggest enterprise client. The hostess led me to our usual table by the window overlooking Elliott Bay. The restaurant buzzed with tech executives and venture capitalists, the kind of crowd that had become our natural environment over the past 5 years. Jessica walked in exactly at 8, but she wasn't alone. Behind her was Marcus, our chief technology officer, looking uncomfortable in an ill-fitting suit. Strange. Why would Marcus be at what I assumed was a private dinner between Jessica and me? "Rebecca," Jessica hugged me, but it felt forced, mechanical. "Thanks for coming." Marcus nodded awkwardly. We'd worked together for 3 years, but he'd always been Jessica's hire, her college friend from Stanford. I respected his technical skills, but we'd never been particularly close. "So what's this about?" I asked as they settled into their seats. "You sounded serious on the phone." Jessica exchanged a glance with Marcus, then took a deep breath. "Rebecca, we've been thinking about the direction of the company, about leadership and vision and where CloudSync is headed." I felt my stomach tighten. In 5 years of partnership, Jessica had never questioned my leadership. We'd built this company together, her technical expertise and my business acumen, creating the perfect storm that had made us millionaires before 30. "What kind of direction?" I asked carefully. Marcus leaned forward, suddenly finding his voice. "Rebecca, you're brilliant at the business side, but technology is evolving so fast. We think CloudSync needs more technical leadership at the top." The words hit me like ice water. More technical leadership? Jessica placed her hands flat on the table, a gesture I recognized from our early days when she was about to deliver bad news to clients. "We want to restructure the company. I would become CEO, you'd move to Chief Business Officer, and Marcus would be promoted to Chief Operating Officer." The restaurant noise faded to a buzz. My vision tunneled. Jessica, my best friend since business school, my co-founder, my partner in everything, was staging a corporate coup. "You want to demote me," I said, my voice eerily calm, "in the company I founded." "It's not a demotion," Jessica said quickly. "It's a restructuring that plays to everyone's strengths. You'd still have significant equity, still be crucial to operations." Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "Rebecca, your business development skills are incredible, but as we scale to 9 figures, we need technical vision at the helm." I stared at them both, these people I'd trusted with everything. Jessica, who'd been my roommate at Wharton, who'd been my maid of honor when I married David 3 years ago, who knew every detail of my life. Marcus, who I'd personally approved for hire, whose salary I'd fought to increase every review cycle. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. Jessica at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Rebecca, it's not about planning. It's about recognizing reality. The board has concerns about technical leadership." The board? Our board consisted of 5 people, Jessica and me as co-founders, plus 3 investors from our Series B round. If Jessica had Marcus's support and could sway even one investor, she'd have a majority. "What does the board say exactly?" I pressed. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through what looked like email threads. "Several members have expressed concerns about the technical roadmap. They think we need stronger engineering leadership to compete with Microsoft and Google." I realized they'd been working behind my back for weeks, maybe months, building consensus, gathering support, preparing to push me aside in the company I'd conceived, funded with my own savings and grown from my relationships and business expertise. "When do you want to implement this restructuring?" I asked, still maintaining that strange calm. "We were hoping to present it to the board next week," Jessica said. "Get it approved before the end of the quarter." I picked up my purse slowly, left a $50 bill on the table for the wine I hadn't touched, and stood up. "I'll think about it." As I walked toward the exit, I heard Jessica call my name, but I didn't turn around. In the reflection of the restaurant's windows, I could see them still sitting there, probably already celebrating their successful ambush. The drive home to Bellevue was a blur of rain and city lights. My house, a modern glass and steel structure overlooking Lake Washington that I'd bought with CloudSync profits, felt cold and empty. David was traveling for his consulting firm, which had become more frequent lately. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, I had always been the ambitious one in my family. My parents, Robert and Linda Thompson, owned a small accounting firm that served local businesses. They were hardworking, honest people who taught me the value of building something from scratch, but they never understood my drive to create something bigger than a neighborhood practice. My younger brother Michael was content working as a software developer at Intel, earning a steady paycheck and going home at 5 every day. He often joked that I was too intense about business, that I should learn to relax and enjoy life. But I couldn't relax when I saw opportunities everywhere. Even in high school, I was selling custom jewelry to classmates and tutoring students for SAT prep. By college at University of Washington, I had started 3 different small businesses, from a campus food delivery service to selling study guides online. That's where I met Jessica during our sophomore year. She was brilliant, absolutely brilliant at computer science, but had no interest in the business side of technology. I was fascinated by tech, but knew my strengths lay in strategy, marketing, and operations. We became roommates junior year and spent countless nights talking about our future. Jessica would code while I worked on business plans. She'd show me elegant algorithms while I explained market analysis and competitive positioning. "You know what we should do?" I said one night during finals week. Surrounded by empty coffee cups and textbooks, "We should start a company together after graduation. Your technical skills, my business experience." Jessica looked up from her laptop where she was debugging some complex machine learning model. "What kind of company?" "Something in cloud computing, enterprise data management. I've been researching the market, and there's a huge opportunity for companies that can help businesses migrate and manage their data more efficiently." That conversation at 2 a.m. in our cramped apartment near campus was the beginning of CloudSync Technologies. After graduation, we moved to Seattle with $50,000 I had saved from my various college businesses and a $25,000 loan from my parents. Jessica contributed her technical expertise and an impressive portfolio of projects she'd built during internships at Microsoft and Amazon. We rented a tiny office in a shared workspace in South Lake Union and spent 18 months building our first product, a cloud migration platform that could help mid-sized businesses move their data infrastructure to AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud with minimal downtime. Those early days were brutal. Jessica would code for 12 hours straight while I cold called potential clients, wrote grant applications, and handled everything from bookkeeping to legal compliance. We survived on ramen noodles and ambition, sleeping on air mattresses in the office more nights than we went home. But we complemented each other perfectly. Jessica's technical vision was extraordinary. She could see solutions to problems that other developers missed entirely, and I could translate her innovations into business value, finding clients who would pay for what she built. Our first big break came when I landed a meeting with Patricia Williams, the CTO of a regional healthcare company called Northwest Medical Systems. They had been struggling with data migration project for over a year, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on consultants who couldn't deliver results. "Miss Thompson," Patricia said during our presentation, "your platform looks impressive, but you're just 2 people in a shared office. How do we know you can handle a project this size?" Jessica stepped up with a live demonstration that was absolutely flawless. She showed how our platform could migrate their patient data, maintaining HIPAA compliance while reducing downtime by 80% compared to traditional methods. "We can handle it because we built this specifically for companies like yours," I told Patricia. "The big consulting firms try to force you into their existing frameworks. We designed our platform from the ground up to solve the exact problems you're facing." We won the contract, $300,000 for a 6-month implementation. It was more money than Jessica and I had ever imagined having. That success led to more clients, which led to hiring our first employees, which led to needing better office space and more sophisticated operations. Within 2 years, we had 15 employees and were generating $2 million in annual revenue. Jessica handled product development and technical architecture, while I managed sales, marketing, customer success, and business operations. We each owned 40% of the company, with 20% reserved for employee equity. The growth was exhilarating but exhausting. I was working 70-hour weeks, traveling constantly to meet with clients, and handling every aspect of the business that wasn't directly technical. Jessica worked just as hard, but her work was more contained. She could focus on coding and technical strategy, while I dealt with the chaos of scaling a business. By year 3, we needed significant capital to compete with larger firms that were entering our market. That's when I started the process of raising our Series A funding round. Venture capital was a completely new world for me. I spent months learning the language, understanding how valuations worked, and preparing pitch decks that could convince investors to bet millions of dollars on our vision. Jessica was uncomfortable with the fundraising process. She hated presenting to rooms full of investors who asked probing questions about technical details and market positioning. "You handle the money stuff," she'd tell me. "I'll make sure the product is amazing." I didn't mind. I actually enjoyed the intellectual challenge of fundraising. Crafting the narrative of our company's future, analyzing market opportunities, and negotiating terms that would give us the capital we needed while preserving our control. We raised $8 million in Series A funding from Cascade Ventures, led by Jonathan Hayes, a former Microsoft executive who understood our market intimately. The valuation put CloudSync at $25 million, making Jessica's and my stakes worth $10 million each on paper. The funding allowed us to expand rapidly. We hired senior engineers, built out our sales team, and invested heavily in marketing and business development. Jessica became our chief technology officer, while I remained CEO, handling strategy and operations. Marcus Williams joined us 6 months after our Series A, recruited by Jessica from her network at Stanford. He was undeniably talented, a machine learning expert with experience at Google and Facebook, but I noticed immediately that he was more loyal to Jessica than to the company. "Rebecca's great," I overheard him telling one of our other engineers, "but she doesn't really understand the technical challenges we're facing. Jessica gets it." I should have paid more attention to that comment, but I was too busy scaling the business, managing our growing client base, and preparing for our Series B funding round. The Series B process was even more intensive than our Series A. We were now competing for $20 million from top-tier venture firms, which meant months of due diligence, financial audits, and presentations to investment committees. Jessica became increasingly frustrated with the time these processes took away from product development. "Why do we need all this money?" she'd ask. "We're profitable. Can't we just grow organically?" But I could see the competitive landscape shifting. Amazon was launching new cloud services that competed directly with some of our offerings. Microsoft was acquiring smaller firms in our space. Google was investing heavily in enterprise cloud solutions. "We need the capital to stay ahead," I explained during one of our weekly strategy meetings. "If we don't scale quickly, we'll get crushed by the big players." It was during the Series B process that I insisted on updating our shareholder agreements to include founder protection clauses. Our lawyers at Morrison & Associates recommended them as standard practice for companies our size. These provisions protect all founders from hostile takeovers or forced removal, explained Sarah Morrison, the partner handling our transaction. "If someone tries to remove a founder without cause, that founder can trigger a mandatory buyout provision." Jessica barely paid attention to the legal details. She was focused on technical roadmaps and product development, leaving the corporate governance issues to me and our attorneys. "Whatever you think is best," she said when I explained the new provisions. "I trust your judgment on the business stuff." Those words would prove to be very expensive for her later. We closed our Series B in March, raising $20 million at a $75 million valuation. Jessica and I each now owned 35% of a company worth $75 million, making our individual stakes worth over $26 million. The success was intoxicating, but it also created new pressures. Our investors expected aggressive growth, expanded market share, and clear progress toward an eventual exit strategy, either going public or being acquired by a larger technology company. Jessica thrived under the technical challenges, but struggled with the business pressures. She started questioning every strategic decision, second-guessing our market positioning, and expressing frustration about the time I spent on non-technical activities like investor relations and business development. Sometimes I feel like we're becoming too business-focused, she told me during a late-night conversation in the office. "We're spending more time talking to investors than building great products." "The great products don't matter if we can't scale and compete," I replied. "The market is moving too fast for us to just focus on technology." I should have recognized this as the beginning of our fundamental disagreement about the company's direction. Jessica wanted to be a technical company that happened to make money. I wanted to be a successful business that happened to use great technology. That philosophical difference became more pronounced as we approached our 4th year. Our revenue was growing steadily, reaching $15 million annually, but our growth rate was slowing compared to some of our venture-backed competitors. Jessica began spending more time with Marcus, discussing technical strategies and expressing concerns about our market approach. I noticed them having private conversations that stopped when I approached, but I attributed it to normal technical discussions. Meanwhile, I was working on our most ambitious business development yet, a potential partnership with Salesforce that could integrate our data migration tools with their CRM platform. The deal could potentially triple our revenue within 2 years, but it required significant technical modifications to our core platform. "This partnership could transform our entire business," I explained to Jessica and Marcus during a strategy meeting. "But we need to modify our API architecture to integrate seamlessly with Salesforce's ecosystem." Marcus frowned. That would require rebuilding significant portions of our core platform. It could take 6 months and delay other product development. The revenue opportunity justifies the investment, I argued. We're talking about potentially $50 million in new revenue over the next 3 years. Jessica looked skeptical. Rebecca, I'm not sure we should restructure our entire platform around one partnership. What if it doesn't work out? Then we'll have a more flexible platform that can integrate with other major enterprise software companies, I replied. This isn't just about Salesforce. It's about positioning ourselves as the integration leader in our market. The disagreement continued for weeks. Jessica and Marcus argued for incremental technical improvements and organic growth. I pushed for the aggressive business development that could accelerate our path to IPO or acquisition. During this period, I started noticing changes in office dynamics. Some engineers seemed to defer more to Jessica's technical opinions than my strategic direction. Our head of sales, Tom Rodriguez, mentioned that Jessica had been asking detailed questions about our revenue projections and client relationships. She's just trying to understand the business side better, Tom explained when I asked about it. But some of her questions seemed more like she was evaluating our strategy rather than just learning about it. I dismissed these concerns as normal growing pains. Jessica was naturally curious and analytically minded. Of course, she'd want to understand every aspect of our business. But the signs were there, building gradually over several months. Private conversations between Jessica and Marcus that stopped when I approached. Questions from Jessica about board dynamics and investor relationships. Subtle challenges to my strategic decisions during team meetings. The breaking point came during our quarterly board meeting in September. Jessica presented a technical roadmap that directly contradicted the Salesforce partnership strategy I'd been developing. I think we need to focus on core platform stability rather than major integrations, she told our board of directors. Rebecca's partnership approach is aggressive, but it could compromise our technical foundation. Jonathan Hayes, our lead investor, looked confused. I thought we had aligned on the Salesforce strategy. Rebecca, what's your response to Jessica's concerns? I felt blindsided. Jessica had never expressed these concerns so directly, and certainly not in front of our board. Jessica and I have been discussing various approaches, I said carefully. I believe the partnership strategy offers the best path to rapid growth and market leadership. The meeting ended with the board requesting a more detailed analysis of both approaches, but the damage was done. Jessica had publicly challenged my strategic leadership in front of our investors. That night, I called Jessica to discuss what had happened. I had to be honest about my technical concerns, she said. The board deserves to hear all perspectives. You blindsided me, Jessica. We should have worked through these issues privately before presenting them to the board. Maybe we should have, but Rebecca, I'm worried that you're making decisions without fully understanding the technical implications. It was the first time Jessica had directly questioned my competence, rather than just disagreeing with my strategy. Something fundamental had shifted in our relationship. Over the following weeks, I began paying closer attention to office dynamics and realized the extent of Jessica's behind-the-scenes campaign. She had been systematically building support among our technical team, questioning my strategic decisions, and positioning herself as the leader who truly understood our company's technical needs. Marcus had become her lieutenant in this effort, amplifying her concerns about my leadership and suggesting that CloudSync needed more technical vision at the executive level. Other employees started treating me differently, still respectful, but with a subtle deference to Jessica's opinions that hadn't existed before. Our head of engineering, Lisa Chang, began routing technical decisions through Jessica, even when they had business implications that were clearly my responsibility. I realized that Jessica was conducting a sophisticated corporate coup, building consensus for a leadership change while maintaining plausible deniability about her intentions. That's when she called requesting the dinner meeting at the Metropolitan. Sitting in my home office after that disastrous dinner, I understood the full scope of what Jessica was attempting. She had spent months positioning herself as the technical visionary while characterizing me as an obstacle to innovation. She had built alliances with key employees and was probably working on investor support. The board meeting she had proposed would be her opportunity to formalize the leadership change she'd been orchestrating behind my scenes. But Jessica made one crucial mistake. She had assumed that I would accept her coup attempt, that I would prioritize our friendship over my control of the company I had conceived and built. She was about to learn that some friendships don't survive betrayal, and that corporate coups can be very expensive when they fail. I spent the next hour reviewing every legal document related to CloudSync's corporate structure, the shareholder agreements, the board composition, the founder protection clauses that our lawyers had insisted on including during our Series B funding. As I read through the founder protection provisions, I smiled for the first time since leaving the Metropolitan. Section 7.3. In the event that any founding member is removed from their executive position or has their authority materially reduced without documented cause, constituting gross negligence or criminal behavior, said founding member may exercise mandatory buyout provisions within 30 days of such action. Section 7.4. Mandatory buyout provisions allow the affected founder to either A. Require the company to purchase their equity stake at fair market value, as determined by independent valuation, or B. Purchase the equity stakes of other founding members at the same fair market value. Section 7.5. Fair market value shall be determined based on the most recent funding round valuation, adjusted for current revenue and growth metrics, as assessed by an independent investment banking firm. Based on our Series B valuation and current financial performance, CloudSync worth approximately $135 million. Jessica's 35% stake would be valued at roughly $47 million. If she succeeded in demoting me from CEO to Chief Business Officer, I could force the company to buy my shares for $47 million. Or alternatively, I could purchase her shares for the same amount and gain majority control. Either option would be financially devastating for Jessica's coup attempt. The next morning, I called Patricia Morrison, our corporate attorney. Patricia, I need to understand the exact trigger conditions for our founder protection clauses. Good morning, Rebecca. Are you concerned about a potential leadership challenge? Let's call it a hypothetical scenario. If the board voted to change my role from CEO to a subordinate position, would that trigger the protection provisions? There was a pause while Patricia presumably reviewed our documents. Yes, absolutely. Any material reduction in a founder's authority or responsibility would constitute grounds for triggering the buyout provisions. And the company would have 90 days to complete the financial transaction? Correct. Either paying you $47 million for your shares or facilitating your purchase of Jessica's shares for the same amount. Does CloudSync have $47 million in available capital? Another pause. According to your last financial statements, you have approximately $8 million in cash reserves. You'd need to secure significant debt financing or additional investment to fund a buyout of that size. Perfect. Jessica's coup would either fail completely or force the company into a financial crisis trying to remove me. Patricia, I want you to prepare 2 sets of documents. First, a formal notice that any attempt to reduce my executive authority will trigger the founder protection clauses. Second, paperwork to exercise my option to purchase Jessica's shares if that becomes necessary. Rebecca, are you sure about this approach? A $47 million transaction would fundamentally change your relationship with Jessica. Jessica had fundamentally changed our relationship when she decided to steal my company. Now I was just going to make her pay for it. I'm certain. How quickly can you prepare the documents? I can have preliminary paperwork ready by tomorrow afternoon, but Rebecca, once you trigger these provisions, there's no returning to your previous partnership dynamic. The previous partnership dynamic ended when Jessica decided to stage a coup. Now I'm protecting what I built. I spent the rest of that day quietly gathering intelligence about Jessica's campaign. I scheduled informal coffee meetings with key employees, ostensibly to check in about their projects and concerns. The picture that emerged was disturbing. Jessica had been systematically undermining my authority for months, questioning my strategic decisions, and suggesting that I was holding back the company's technical potential. Lisa Chang, our head of engineering, revealed that Jessica had been asking detailed questions about team morale and whether engineers felt supported by current leadership. Tom Rodriguez from sales mentioned that Jessica had inquired about client feedback regarding our technical capabilities versus business development focus. Even Sarah Kim from HR had been approached by Jessica about potential organizational restructuring to better align technical and business functions. Jessica had conducted a comprehensive campaign to build support for removing me from leadership. She had positioned herself as the solution to problems that she had largely created through her undermining efforts. But the most damaging discovery came from an unexpected source. David Chen, one of our junior engineers, approached me nervously after our team meeting. Rebecca, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Jessica asked me to document instances where strategic decisions conflicted with technical recommendations. My blood went cold. What kind of documentation? She said it was for internal process improvement, but she wanted specific examples of times when business priorities overruled engineering concerns. Jessica was building a formal case for my removal, documenting evidence that she could present to the board as justification for the leadership change. David, did you provide the documentation she requested? He looked uncomfortable. I gave her a few examples, but honestly, I couldn't find many instances where your decisions actually conflicted with good technical practice. Most of the time, your business strategy aligned well with our technical capabilities. That evening, I called an emergency meeting with our 3 investor board members, Jonathan Hayes from Cascade Ventures, Maria Rodriguez from Techstars Capital, and David Kim from Northgate Partners. I wanted to give you advance warning about some issues that may come up at next week's board meeting, I told them via video conference. What kind of issues? Jonathan asked. There's been some discussion about organizational restructuring. I want you to understand the full legal and financial implications before any decisions are made. I shared my screen and walked them through the founder protection clauses in our shareholder agreement. Maria's expression shifted from confusion to concern as she read through the provisions. Rebecca, are you saying that any leadership changes could trigger mandatory buyout requirements? That's exactly what I'm saying. Any material reduction in a founding member's authority would give that founder the right to force a $47 million transaction. David Kim was already pulling up financial documents on his laptop. CloudSync doesn't have anywhere near that kind of cash available. We'd be talking about major debt financing or emergency funding rounds, which would significantly dilute existing shareholders and potentially destabilize the entire company, I added. Jonathan leaned back in his chair. Rebecca, this changes the entire dynamic of any leadership discussions. Who else knows about these provisions? As far as I know, just me, our attorneys, and now you. I don't believe Jessica fully understood the implications when we signed the agreements during our Series B. The call ended with 3 very concerned investors who now understood that any coup attempt against me would be financially catastrophic for everyone involved. Over the weekend, I prepared for what would be either the most important board meeting in CloudSync's history or the end of my partnership with Jessica. I reviewed every aspect of our corporate structure, our financial position, and our strategic options. I practiced presenting the legal implications of the founder protection clauses and prepared responses to any arguments Jessica might make. Most importantly, I secured a $50 million credit line from Goldman Sachs, using my CloudSync equity as collateral. If Jessica forced me to exercise the buyout option, I'd have the capital ready to purchase her shares and gain majority control of the company. Monday morning, I arrived at the office early and called Jessica. We need to talk privately before the board meeting tomorrow, I said. About what? About the legal implications of the organizational restructuring you're proposing. There was a long pause. I don't know what you mean. Jessica, let's not pretend. You've spent months building a case to remove me as CEO. I think you should understand what that would cost before you proceed. We agreed to meet in my office at the end of the day, after most employees had left. Jessica arrived at 6 p.m., accompanied by Marcus. I had expected this. She probably wanted a witness to our conversation. Rebecca, I want you to know that this isn't personal, Jessica began. It's about what's best for CloudSync's future. What's best for CloudSync is maintaining stable leadership and avoiding financial catastrophe, I replied, which is what will happen if you proceed with your plan. I handed them both copies of the Founder Protection Clause analysis that Patricia had prepared. Marcus read through it quickly, his face going pale. Jessica, did you know about these buyout provisions? Jessica was scanning the document, her expression shifting from confidence to confusion to alarm. This can't be right. You can't hold the company hostage over a leadership discussion. I'm not holding anyone hostage. I'm enforcing the shareholder agreements that we all signed. Agreements that specifically protect founders from exactly what you're attempting. But this is ridiculous, Jessica protested. $47 million? The company doesn't have that kind of money. No, it doesn't, which means your coup attempt would either fail completely or force CloudSync into bankruptcy trying to buy me out. Marcus looked between Jessica and me. There has to be another way to resolve this. There is, I said. Jessica can abandon her plan to remove me, and we can continue working together as we have for the past 5 years. Jessica stood up abruptly. Rebecca, you're being completely unreasonable. This is about the good of the company, not personal power. If it's about the good of the company, then you should want to avoid a financial crisis that could destroy everything we've built. They left without resolving anything, but I could see that the reality of the founder protection clauses had fundamentally changed Jessica's calculations. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find an email from Jessica to all employees announcing that the board meeting had been postponed pending further strategic discussions. She had backed down, but I knew this wasn't over. Jessica would either find another approach or accept that her coup attempt had failed. Either way, our partnership was effectively finished. That afternoon, Jessica requested another private meeting. Rebecca, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. Maybe there's a way we can work through this. What did you have in mind? What if we agreed to bring in an outside CEO, someone who could provide independent leadership while both of us remained as co-founders in technical and business roles? I almost laughed. After months of undermining my authority and building a case for my removal, Jessica was now proposing that we both step aside for a neutral third party. Jessica, that's not how founder protection clauses work. Any reduction in my authority triggers the buyout provisions, regardless of whether you get promoted or we both get demoted. She looked frustrated. Then what do you propose? We can't keep working together with this tension. You're right, we can't. I pulled out the buyout paperwork that Patricia had prepared. I'm exercising my option to purchase your shares for $47 million. Jessica stared at the documents. You're buying me out? I'm buying you out. You tried to steal my company, and now I'm going to make sure you can never do it again. Rebecca, this is insane. $47 million to eliminate a business disagreement? This wasn't a business disagreement. This was a calculated attempt to remove me from the company I founded and built. You spent months undermining my authority, building coalitions against me and preparing to humiliate me in front of our board. And if I refuse to sell? Then you'll have to pay me $47 million to keep your position. Your choice. Jessica left without signing anything, but I knew she was trapped. She didn't have $47 million to buy me out, and she couldn't afford to let me force the company into bankruptcy with a mandatory buyout. 3 days later, she signed the papers. The transaction took 6 weeks to complete. I used my Goldman Sachs credit line to pay Jessica $47 million for her 35% stake in CloudSync Technologies. Combined with my original 35%, I now owned 70% of the company. Jessica cleaned out her office on a Friday afternoon in November. I watched from my window as she loaded boxes into her Tesla, the same car she'd bought with CloudSync profits 2 years earlier. Marcus requested a meeting the following Monday. Rebecca, I want to apologize for my role in what happened, he said. I should have talked to you directly instead of going along with Jessica's plan. Why didn't you? Honestly, Jessica convinced me that you were planning to replace me anyway. She said you'd been talking about bringing in a more senior CTO with enterprise experience. I never said that. I realize that now. But at the time, it seemed like supporting her was my only option to stay with the company. I studied Marcus carefully. He was an excellent engineer who had contributed significantly to our technical platform. More importantly, he seemed genuinely remorseful about the coup attempt. Marcus, I'm going to give you a choice. You can stay as CTO reporting directly to me with clear understanding that I make all strategic decisions, or you can leave with a generous severance package and strong references. I'd like to stay if you'll have me. Then we're clear on the chain of command? Completely clear. You're the CEO, I'm the CTO, and strategic decisions are your responsibility. It was a simple conversation that should have happened months earlier, before Jessica poisoned the relationship with conspiracies and power plays. Over the following months, I restructured CloudSync to eliminate any possibility of future challenges to my authority. I promoted Lisa Chang to Chief Operating Officer, giving her oversight of all engineering operations. I hired a new CFO from Amazon who brought enterprise-level financial controls and strategic planning expertise. I expanded our board of directors to include 2 additional independent members who would provide guidance without threatening my control. I made it clear to every employee that CloudSync had one CEO, one vision, and one decision maker. Most importantly, I implemented the Salesforce partnership that Jessica had opposed. The technical integration took 8 months and required significant modifications to our platform, but the revenue impact was transformational. Within 12 months of buying out Jessica, CloudSync was generating $35 million in annual revenue. The Salesforce partnership alone accounted for $18 million of that growth. 18 months after the buyout, we raised a Series C funding round at a $180 million valuation. My 70% stake was now worth $126 million, nearly triple what I'd paid to eliminate Jessica. 2 years after the coup attempt, CloudSync went public in an IPO that valued the company at $420 million. My stake was worth nearly $300 million. I heard through mutual connects that Jessica had started a new company with her buyout money, some kind of AI-focused platform that was probably competing with us in adjacent markets. I wished her well, but made sure our legal team monitored for any intellectual property violations. Looking back, I realized that Jessica's betrayal was actually the best thing that could have happened to my career. Without the coup attempt, I would never have discovered the true value of the founder protection clauses I'd negotiated. I would never have learned to recognize and defend against internal threats to my authority. Most importantly, I would never have gained the complete control that allowed CloudSync to reach its full potential. The company thrived under clear, unambiguous leadership. Without internal politics and power struggles consuming energy, our team focused entirely on building great products and serving clients. Our growth accelerated, our culture improved, and our market position strengthened. 3 years after buying out Jessica, CloudSync was acquired by Salesforce for $850 million. My 70% stake was worth $595 million. At 34, I had become one of the youngest female tech entrepreneurs to achieve a 9-figure exit. The acquisition announcement was made on a Tuesday morning in March. I stood in our main conference room, looking out at the Seattle skyline, addressing the 180 employees who had helped build CloudSync into what it had become. Today marks a new chapter for CloudSync Technologies, I told them. Salesforce has acquired our company for $850 million, and every single person in this room will benefit from our success. The employee equity pool that Jessica and I had established years earlier meant that even our most junior engineers would receive six-figure payouts. Our senior team members would become millionaires overnight. After the all-hands meeting, I retreated to my office to process what had just happened. In 7 years, I had gone from a recent college graduate with $50,000 in savings to a tech entrepreneur worth nearly $600 million. But the financial success, as satisfying as it was, wasn't the most important lesson from this experience. I had learned that loyalty can't be assumed, even with people you've known for years. Jessica and I had built something incredible together, but when she saw an opportunity to take control, our friendship became secondary to her ambition. I had learned the critical importance of protecting what you build. The founder protection clauses that I'd insisted on during our Series B funding had literally saved my company and my career. Without them, Jessica's coup might have succeeded. Most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the most expensive decision is also the smartest one. $47 million had seemed like an enormous amount to pay for corporate control, but it turned out to be the best investment I ever made. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. It was Jessica. Saw the news about the Salesforce acquisition. Congratulations. You were right about the partnership strategy. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Thank you. I hope your new company is going well. It was a polite exchange between former partners who had once been best friends. There was no animosity in her message, but there was also no warmth. We had both moved on to different lives. Later that week, I received a call from Patricia Morrison, the lawyer who had helped structure our founder protection clauses years earlier. Rebecca, I've been following CloudSync's success. I wanted to congratulate you on an exceptional outcome. Thank you, Patricia. I owe a lot of this to the legal protections you helped us establish. It's gratifying to see those provisions work as intended. Most founders never need to use them, but when they do, they can be company saving. Patricia, I've been thinking about starting an investment fund focused on early stage tech companies. Would you be interested in helping structure something like that? Absolutely. With your experience and capital, you could be a very effective early-stage investor. 6 months after the Salesforce acquisition, I launched Thompson Ventures with $100 million of my own capital. My investment thesis was simple: back exceptional founders who were building innovative technology companies and help them avoid the mistakes I had made. My first investment was in a young woman named Sarah Kim, who had developed a revolutionary approach to cybersecurity for small businesses. She reminded me of myself at 25. Brilliant, driven, and completely focused on solving real problems for her customers. Sarah, let me give you some advice about protecting what you build. I told her during our first board meeting. As you scale and bring on partners, make sure you have legal protections in place that prevent anyone from taking control of your company without your consent. I helped Sarah structure founder protection clauses similar to the ones that had saved CloudSync. I also connected her with Patricia Morrison for legal guidance and introduced her to other successful female entrepreneurs who could provide mentorship. Over the next 2 years, Thompson Ventures invested in 12 companies, focusing primarily on female and minority founders who often struggled to access traditional venture capital. My portfolio included everything from biotech startups to fintech platforms to consumer applications, but my favorite investment remained Sarah's cybersecurity company, which grew from 3 employees to over 50 during my involvement. Watching her navigate the challenges of scaling a startup brought back memories of my early days with Jessica, but with the benefit of experience and wisdom. Rebecca, how do you know when someone is trying to undermine your authority? Sarah asked during one of our quarterly reviews. Pay attention to patterns, I told her. Private conversations that stop when you approach. Questions about your decision-making that seem designed to gather ammunition rather than understand reasoning. Employees who start deferring to other people's opinions instead of yours. And if you identify those patterns, address them immediately and directly. Don't hope they'll resolve themselves, and don't assume good intentions. People who want to take your company will rarely announce their intentions openly. It was advice I wished someone had given me during Jessica's campaign against my leadership. 3 years after launching Thompson Ventures, my portfolio was worth over $300 million. Several of my investments had achieved successful exits, and others were on track for IPOs or acquisitions. But the most satisfying aspect of my new career wasn't the financial returns. It was helping other entrepreneurs avoid the betrayals and setbacks I had experienced. During this period, I also started speaking at conferences about corporate governance and founder protection. My story became a case study taught at business schools, illustrating the importance of proper legal structures in startup companies. The mistake most founders make, I would tell audiences, is assuming that good relationships eliminate the need for protective legal agreements. But relationships change, especially when significant money is involved. I always emphasized that founder protection weren't about paranoia or mistrust. They were about ensuring that companies could survive leadership transitions without financial catastrophe. Think of these provisions as insurance, I would explain. You hope you never need them, but if you do, they can save your company and your career. On the 5th anniversary of buying out Jessica, I received an unexpected invitation. She was hosting a launch event for her new company's Series A funding announcement and had invited several Seattle tech entrepreneurs, including me. I almost declined, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what Jessica had built with her CloudSync buyout money. The event was held at the W Seattle, the same hotel where we had celebrated CloudSync's Series B funding years earlier. Jessica looked successful and confident as she presented her new company's AI-powered analytics platform. Our technology helps enterprise clients optimize their decision-making through advanced machine learning and predictive modeling, she explained to the crowd of investors and industry professionals. It was impressive technology, though not directly competitive with CloudSync's data migration focus. Jessica had clearly learned from our experience and chosen a market with less direct competition from major cloud providers. After her presentation, she approached me near the bar. "Rebecca, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. Congratulations on the funding. The technology looks impressive. Thank you. I've learned a lot since CloudSync about building companies and managing investor relationships." We talked for a few minutes about industry trends and mutual acquaintances. The conversation was polite but distant, like former colleagues catching up rather than former best friends. "Rebecca, I want you to know that I understand now why you made the decisions you did," Jessica said as our conversation was ending. "At the time, I thought you were being unreasonable, but I've gained perspective on how difficult it is to protect what you've built." "I hope your new company succeeds," I replied genuinely. "You're brilliant at technology and you deserve to build something great." It was the closest thing to closure we would ever have. Jessica had acknowledged that my response to her coup attempt had been justified, even if she couldn't bring herself to apologize directly. Driving home from the event, I reflected on how much my life had changed since that awful dinner at the Metropolitan 5 years earlier. I was wealthier than I had ever imagined possible, but more importantly, I was wiser about business relationships and corporate governance. I had learned to distinguish between partnerships built on mutual respect and dependencies disguised as friendship. I had learned to protect what I built through proper legal structures rather than hoping that good intentions would prevail. Most importantly, I had learned that some betrayals, painful as they are, can ultimately lead to better outcomes than maintaining dysfunctional relationships. Today, at 36, I manage a successful venture capital fund, serve on several corporate boards, and am frequently invited to speak about entrepreneurship and corporate governance. My net worth has grown to over $800 million through successful investments and continued appreciation of my Salesforce stock. But the metrics that matter most to me aren't financial. They're the 12 companies in my portfolio that are building innovative solutions to real problems. They're the 23 female entrepreneurs I've mentored who have gone on to raise their own funding and build successful companies. They're the hundreds of founders who have attended my speaking engagements and implemented founder protection clauses that may someday save their companies from hostile takeovers. I still think about Jessica sometimes, wondering if she realizes that her betrayal actually accelerated my success beyond what would have been possible with our continued partnership. But mostly I focus on the future, helping other entrepreneurs avoid the mistakes I made and achieve the success they deserve. The story of CloudSync Technologies has become part of Seattle's startup mythology, a cautionary tale about the importance of legal protections and corporate governance. Business school students study our shareholder agreements. Legal conferences use our case as an example of effective founder protection clauses. But for me, it's simply the story of how I learned to value what I had built enough to fight for it, regardless of the cost or the relationships that had to be sacrificed in the process. Some people call what I did ruthless. I call it necessary. When someone tries to steal your life's work, you don't negotiate or compromise. You use every legal tool available to protect what you've created. And if you're smart enough to have negotiated the right protections in advance, you make them pay for their betrayal. Literally. $47 million was the price of my independence, my company's future, and my peace of mind. It remains the best money I ever spent. The irony is that Jessica's attempt to steal my company ultimately made me far wealthier and more successful than our continued partnership ever could have. Her betrayal forced me to take complete control of CloudSync, which enabled the aggressive growth strategy that led to our successful exit. Without her coup attempt, I might have remained a co-CEO sharing decision-making authority. Instead, I became the sole leader of a company that eventually sold for nearly $1 billion. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Jessica taught me that lesson, though I doubt she intended to. Now I teach it to other entrepreneurs, hoping they'll have the wisdom to protect themselves before they need it, and the courage to use those protections when the time comes. Because in the end, the only person responsible for protecting what you've built is you. And if you're not willing to pay the price for that protection, someone else will gladly take it away.